At 56 years old, Danny Kessler had won everything professional golf could offer. 5 major championships, a spot in the Sports Hall of Fame, and career earnings north of $900 million. None of that mattered anymore, because 2 businesses carrying his family's name were being forced into total liquidation, and 3 people closest to him had walked away in the same 6-month stretch. The first business sat in strip malls across Orange County, California. Kessler was part of an ownership group holding the rights to 7 Burger Post franchise locations, a fast casual chain built around smash burgers and hand-cut fries. These were not side investments. Each location employed between 25 and 40 people and required a monthly payroll of $30,000 to $50,000 before a single burger was sold. Across 7 locations, that came to roughly $4 million a month just to keep the doors open, before food costs, utilities, or the quarterly franchise fees owed to corporate. By early 2026, Burger Post's corporate parent had already closed locations in 4 states, citing rising beef prices and commercial rent that had climbed faster than revenue could follow. Kessler's Orange County locations were paying some of the highest lease rates in the country, competing against a dozen other fast casual chains within a 2-mile radius. When consumer spending tightened in the first quarter of 2026, revenue at his locations dropped by more than 15%. The math stopped working. The second business was smaller but more personal. In 2020, Kessler co-founded a company called Ridgeline Wellness with his longtime business partner, Marcus Feld. The company's signature product was a coffee-based supplement called Focus Blend, marketed around energy and mental clarity for older athletes. Based in Scottsdale, Arizona, the company employed 6 people at its peak. The supplement market was crowded, and larger competitors were spending upward of $10 million on single ad campaigns. Kessler had name recognition in golf, but that recognition did not automatically convert into supplement sales at a grocery store in Ohio. When marketing spend dried up in late 2025, sales followed. Neither business failed because it was a bad idea. Burger Post remained a functioning national chain with more than 1,100 locations operating outside Kessler's ownership group. The wellness supplement market was still growing overall, with industry estimates placing total U.S. sales above $62 billion in 2025. Both of Kessler's ventures became collateral damage in a larger collapse that had been building for years. Running 7 franchise locations required more than capital. It required a management structure capable of handling supply contracts, health inspections, and staff turnover across 7 separate sites. Kessler's ownership group had hired a regional operations director in 2019 specifically to manage day-to-day logistics, a role that came with its own 6-figure salary layered on top of location payroll. Beef prices alone rose by roughly 22% between 2023 and 2025, according to industry commodity reports, a cost increase that franchise agreements did not allow Kessler's group to pass fully on to customers without violating chain-wide pricing standards set by Burger Post Corporate. Ridgeline Wellness faced a parallel problem from a different direction. The company had signed a 3-year manufacturing agreement in 2024 with a co-packing facility in Tempe, Arizona, committing to minimum production volumes regardless of actual sales. When sales fell short of those volumes in 2025, the company remained contractually obligated to pay for unsold inventory sitting in a warehouse. That single manufacturing agreement accounted for a significant share of the debt later listed in the company's liquidation filing. That collapse began with a golf league. In 2022, Kessler signed a contract worth approximately $180 million to join the Falcon Golf League, a breakaway tour backed by a sovereign investment fund. At the time, the deal looked like the smartest financial decision of his career. He was already in his 50s, his competitive peak behind him, and the contract secured his family's finances for decades. But the move ended his relationship with the PGA Tour. In his own words, given in a 2022 press conference, Kessler said, "I understand the tour won't welcome me back with open arms, and I've made my peace with that." By 2026, the sovereign fund backing the Falcon Golf League had invested more than $4.5 billion into the venture since launch. That year, the fund withdrew its financial commitment. The league, which had been spending faster than it could generate revenue, was left searching for $300 million in new capital by September 1, 2026. Without it, the league would cease operations entirely. Every player who had left the PGA Tour for the Falcon League faced the same exposure. They had walked away from FedEx Cup points, from major championship exemptions, and from a tour structure that had provided stability for decades, in exchange for guaranteed money that no longer looked guaranteed. The PGA Tour, meanwhile, had not stood still. It had signed new broadcast agreements, expanded its signature event purses, and deepened its playing fields. The tour Kessler left in 2022 was not the tour that existed in 2026. His $180 million contract included no guarantee of payment if the league folded. The sovereign fund was under no obligation to pay out the remaining contract years. Kessler, who had no path back to the PGA Tour without a suspension and a fine his own agent estimated in the tens of millions, found himself with no reliable income from the league he had built his post-50 career around. The Falcon Golf League's business model had relied almost entirely on the sovereign fund's continued backing rather than ticket sales, sponsorship, or broadcast revenue generating enough to sustain operations independently. Internal projections circulated among team owners in 2025 estimated the league needed roughly $450 million annually to cover player contracts, event production, and broadcast infrastructure. Actual revenue from ticket sales and sponsorships across the league's 2025 season totaled an estimated $140 million, according to figures shared with team investors. The gap between those two numbers had been covered entirely by the sovereign fund's ongoing capital injections. When the fund withdrew, no alternative revenue source existed to replace it. Team owners within the league, several of whom had personally guaranteed portions of their franchise's operating costs, began exploring a merger with a rival tour structure in early 2026. Those talks stalled by April, according to statements from two team representatives, over disagreements about which league's television rights would take precedence in any combined entity. Losing that income was only half of what put his businesses at risk. The other half predated the Falcon League entirely. Kessler's gambling activity had been reported on for more than a decade before 2026. Over 3 decades, his losses were estimated at close to $95 million. Between 2010 and 2014 alone, reporting placed his losses above $38 million. His lifetime wagering total, across multiple sports and casino games, was estimated to exceed $1 billion. On a single day in June 2025, Kessler lost $140,000 on baseball wagers alone. In 2016, Kessler was required to repay $1.1 million in trading profits after a federal investigation into a stock trade tied to a company he had no operational connection to. He was not charged criminally, but the repayment became part of the public record. Combined with declining tournament income and the collapsing league, the pattern of losses left fewer reserves to absorb a bad year in either business. Financial advisors who had worked with professional athletes for decades generally recommend that no more than a small percentage of liquid assets be exposed to discretionary spending in any given year, a threshold Kessler's documented wagering activity exceeded repeatedly across multiple years between 2010 and 2025. Golf differs from team sports in that a player's income is tied almost entirely to individual performance and endorsement value rather than a guaranteed salary, which means sustained personal financial losses have a more direct and immediate effect on a golfer's available capital than they might for an athlete under a long-term guaranteed contract. The financial pressure was not the only thing that changed how people around Kessler viewed him. In early 2026, he lost his membership at Brookline Ridge Golf Club, a private course in Rancho Santa Fe, California, where he had been a member for 18 years. According to a statement released by the club's board, Kessler's membership was revoked following an internal investigation into an incident involving a female staff member. The club's statement described the decision as decisive action taken to uphold the standards of our membership and staff. Kessler did not issue a public response to the club's statement. Around the same time, Kessler's second family relationship shifted. His wife, Elena Kessler, who managed the family's wealth through an outside advisory firm, directed that a condominium the family owned at the Meridian Club in La Quinta, California, be sold immediately rather than listed at market pace. The instruction, relayed through the family's financial advisors, was to liquidate the property as quickly as possible. When a family's own financial advisors push for immediate liquidation rather than a standard sale, it typically signals that cash reserves have already been exhausted. The third relationship affected was with his eldest son, Tyler Kessler, age 24, who had worked at Ridgeline Wellness since its founding in 2020. In March 2026, Tyler resigned from the company and, according to a filing connected to the wellness company's dissolution, formally withdrew his minority ownership stake. Company records listed his stake at 8%. His resignation letter, portions of which were later referenced in the liquidation filing, stated, "I can no longer be associated with decisions I was not part of and do not support." Three people who had stood closest to Danny Kessler, a private club that had known him for nearly 2 decades, his wife's financial team, and his own son, each took action against him within the same calendar year. Brookline Ridge Golf Club had roughly 420 members at the time of the board's decision, according to figures the club disclosed in its 2025 annual report, with an average membership tenure among the club's longtime members exceeding 20 years. Membership at a private club of that kind typically includes not just golf access but standing invitations to member events, a locker with the member's nameplate, and, for many families, a place where children learn the game under the same instructors their parents used decades earlier. Kessler's 2 younger children had taken junior lessons at Brookline Ridge since 2015. Following the board's decision, the family's access to those junior programs ended as well. Elena Kessler's decision to direct the sale of the La Quinta property was communicated to Danny Kessler through the family's outside financial advisory firm rather than directly, according to a person familiar with the family's financial arrangements. The Meridian Club property had been purchased in 2011 for approximately $3.2 million and was sold in 2026 for $4.1 million, a sale price reflecting general appreciation in the La Quinta real estate market over that period rather than any premium tied to the property's ownership history. Kessler played in only one competitive event during 2026. He withdrew from consideration for the Falcon League's spring schedule, citing a private family matter. Sources connected to the family later indicated the matter involved a health issue affecting one of his younger children, though no official statement confirmed the details. When a professional athlete stops competing, tournament income stops as well. Sponsorship payments tied to performance clauses in Kessler's remaining endorsement deals with Anchor Watches and Redline Apparel were both suspended in 2026 under morals and performance clauses standard in athlete contracts. With no tournament income, no reliable payout from the Falcon League, and sponsorship revenue frozen, the two family businesses lost their financial support at the same time. Burger Post's Orange County locations owed back rent across all 7 properties by the second quarter of 2026. Ridgeline Wellness had stopped paying its Scottsdale office lease by April. Creditors for both companies filed petitions in California and Arizona courts, respectively, seeking forced liquidation to recover outstanding debts. Total liquidation differs from a standard business closure. It is court-ordered and creditor-driven rather than voluntary. A court-appointed liquidator inventories every asset, from kitchen equipment to office furniture, before scheduling asset sales. Staff typically receive a notice period of 2 to 3 weeks before locations close permanently. For Burger Post, that meant 7 locations, each employing dozens of workers, shutting down within a single fiscal quarter. For Ridgeline Wellness, it meant the company's remaining inventory of Focus Blend was sold at a fraction of retail price, the Scottsdale office was vacated, and the 6 remaining employees were let go, with severance contingent on what funds remained after creditor claims were settled. Court filings connected to the Burger Post liquidation listed total outstanding debt at approximately $6.2 million across the 7 locations. The Ridgeline Wellness filing listed outstanding debt at $2.8 million, most of it tied to unpaid manufacturing and distribution contracts signed in 2024. The liquidation process for Burger Post proceeded location by location rather than all at once. The first 3 locations, in Irvine, Newport Beach, and Costa Mesa, closed in May 2026. The remaining 4 locations, spread across Huntington Beach, Anaheim, Fullerton, and Santa Ana, closed by the end of July. Approximately 190 employees across the 7 locations lost their jobs over that 3-month period, according to state filings connected to mass layoff notifications required under California law for closures of that size. Financial disclosures connected to the liquidation proceedings placed Kessler's net worth between $310 million and $390 million, figures that account for real estate, remaining investment holdings, and his stake in the now-collapsed Falcon League contract. The businesses represented a small fraction of that total net worth, but the liquidation proceedings became part of the public record specifically because the businesses carried his name and his family's direct involvement. The Falcon Golf League's fundraising deadline of September 1, 2026 remained unmet as of the most recent reporting connected to this account. Without new capital, the league's 2027 season was not expected to proceed. Kessler's contract, worth an original $180 million over its full term, had paid out an estimated 60% of its scheduled value before the league's funding collapse. Kessler's options for returning to competitive golf outside the Falcon League were limited. A return to the PGA Tour would require a formal reinstatement process, including a suspension period and a financial penalty tied to the years he spent outside the tour's structure. The PGA Tour's Champions Circuit, for golfers 50 and older, remained an option requiring no reinstatement penalty, since Kessler had never formally left that eligibility track. Neither the USGA nor the R&A, golf's 2 governing bodies for major championships, issued any statement regarding Kessler's situation as of the most recent reporting. Major championship organizers had not extended any special invitations or exemptions for the 2027 season. At the peak of his career, Kessler had held endorsement agreements with 11 separate companies, spanning apparel, timepieces, automobiles, and financial services. By the middle of 2026, that number had fallen to 3 active agreements, 2 of which included the performance-based suspension clauses that had already been triggered. Endorsement revenue at its height had accounted for an estimated 45% of Kessler's annual income during his years on the PGA Tour, a proportion that shifted significantly after his move to the Falcon League, where tournament and signing bonuses made up the larger share of his earnings. Golf industry analysts who track athlete endorsement value noted that sponsors typically evaluate off-course conduct clauses on a case-by-case basis, weighing factors including media coverage volume, ongoing legal exposure, and the specific language of each contract's morality provisions. In Kessler's case, the combination of the club membership revocation and the business liquidations occurring within months of each other was cited by 2 marketing industry publications as a factor in sponsors' decisions not to renew agreements set to expire in 2026 and 2027. In a brief statement issued through a family spokesperson in June 2026, Kessler said his focus had shifted toward his family. "My priority right now is being the husband and father my family needs me to be. The business matters are being handled by the appropriate professionals, and I trust that process." He did not comment directly on the club membership revocation, his son's resignation, or the specifics of either liquidation filing. The 7 Burger Post locations across Orange County completed their liquidation process by late summer 2026. Ridgeline Wellness's dissolution filing was finalized in Arizona the same season. Both businesses, built under Kessler's name over a combined 6 years, ceased to exist as operating companies. Marcus Feld, Kessler's business partner at Ridgeline Wellness, retained no public role in the company's dissolution proceedings, having sold his own 12% ownership stake back to the company in 2023 under terms that were not disclosed. Feld did not comment publicly on the company's closure when contacted by industry trade publications covering the supplement sector's 2026 market contraction. Tyler Kessler, following his resignation from Ridgeline Wellness and the withdrawal of his ownership stake, took a position with an unrelated logistics firm based in Phoenix, Arizona, according to a professional networking profile updated in May 2026. He did not grant interviews regarding his father's business or the circumstances of his departure from the family company. Champions Tour officials confirmed in mid-2026 that Kessler remained eligible to compete on that circuit beginning in 2027, when he would turn 57, without any reinstatement penalty, since his Falcon League contract had not required him to formally resign his PGA Tour membership at the time of signing. Whether Kessler intended to pursue that path had not been publicly addressed as of the most recent reporting connected to this account. What remained, by the close of 2026, was a financial and public record spanning more than a decade, 2 businesses dissolved through court-ordered liquidation, a golf league that failed to meet its funding deadline, a private club membership revoked following an internal investigation, a real estate holding sold under direction from outside financial advisors, and a family relationship altered by a son's formal withdrawal from the business his father had founded. Each event had its own separate cause. Together, they converged within a single 12-month period in the career of a golfer who, at the height of his success, had been considered one of the most recognizable figures in the sport.